Hi, my name is Masikana and welcome to I Am Masikana TV. Today we are going to be doing Danielle Steel Wanderlust. All her life she had yearned to travel, and now it was her turn to fly free. At 21, Annabelle was the acknowledged beauty, but it was her sister Audrey 4 years later who had the spine and spirit. She had the talent as a photographer. She had the restless urge of a born wanderer. Inevitably, it was Annabelle who was the first to marry, leaving Audrey to wonder if life was passing her by. Sometimes she would dream of a man like her father, someone with adventure in his soul and exotic places in his heart. The men she met in California failed to interest her. Only when she sailed to Europe did she mingle with others more like her. Only when she boarded the Orient Express did she realize she was beginning a journey that would take her beyond her wildest dream. Deep in China, Tibet, the magic of Orient, and later North Africa and Europe, her life would never be the same again. This book has history in it. This book has genocide, has wars in it, has traveling in it. It does have a girl meets boy story, and then girl adopts a Chinese baby during a war, and girl's sister dies because girl's sister is entitled, meets incredible people. Essentially, it's Eat, Pray, Love. Elizabeth Gilbert. Read it. It's a nice book. Should I do a review on it? Probably should. But there's a whole movie on it. I don't know how I feel about Elizabeth Gilbert's books. I start them, but I can't commit to them. Anyway, I digress. I'm back. The story is set in 1924. Her grandfather's well off and she still stays with her grandfather. She gets along with her grandfather because she's able to speak politics with him. Her little sister does not get along with the grandfather because she's spoiled and the grandfather doesn't see any substance in her. Audrey is the one that keeps the household running. Audrey has a dream that she wants to travel the world, doesn't really want to tell her grandfather about that dream. She knows the trauma it will bring to her grandfather. Her father was like her, and he passed on while on one of those adventures. Now the grandfather sort of knew that if Audrey was to go off to that adventure, she would never come back. Annabelle gets married to a guy that is not mentioned a lot, but is mentioned like 3 times. His name is Herquart. I don't like him because he's snobbish, arrogant, and he feels like he can get any girl, and he's very upset that he couldn't get Audrey, and he even tries to make a pass at Audrey. So low self-esteem. I am rich, I'm entitled to everything in the world. A meeting with Annabelle, who is the only thing she cares about is her looks and her wardrobe. So she's lack of substance, annoying, entitled. Basically, it was just 2 narcissists getting together and imploding on each other. Audrey decided, okay, her sister's married, so you know what, let me go on a vacation. First stop was Chicago, next stop was New York. So as she was going to Europe, she goes to this boat and she meets friends, and they're like, let's go to our holiday home, in which she meets her soulmate, which was Charles. Charles was a reporter. Charles was an adventurous person. She had a camera and Charles needed a camera woman. Charles went with Audrey. They went to Istanbul, then they went to China. Yes, there was a war that was happening, but because they were foreigners, it didn't really affect them much. They were protected from the war that was happening. They went to a faraway place in China. It was like a little orphanage. Because of how remote the part of China was, nobody could come and take care of the orphans that were there. Now Audrey decided that she's not going to leave these young children. Therefore Charles was like, listen, I have to get back to work. Therefore they separated in that time. There was no food, there was no water, there was no clean. It was very cold, and kids were dying almost every week because of some sort of sickness. There was one little girl and she was pregnant with a Japanese child. Audrey stayed long enough to help her give birth. There was a general that used to go there for food and treatment, and he came that night and the little Chinese girl was in labor. and they had to do an emergency C-section, in which they took a blade and they cut her stomach. Before she passed on, she was like she would really like it if Audrey adopted her daughter, which she ended up doing. Now picture this is during a depression in America, during a Second World War, or the beginning of a Second World War in Europe. The Chinese, the Europeans, and the Americans, they were not getting along. So for her to be able to adopt a Chinese child and take that child back to America, that was scandalous. The grandfather was very outraged. One, because she had been gone for such a long time. Two, because she brought back scandals in the family, and he had already gotten word that she was spotted with Charles. He had assumed that she was lying. His fears were being validated that Audrey getting her freedom and following her freedom would mean that Audrey would go away, and that meant that he was left with Annabelle, who he didn't like. Annabelle's relationship had long fallen apart. She was drinking more, she was hateful. She had a child called Molly, and the grandfather would say Molly is very dumb. Annabelle became very vindictive, very ugly, very poisonous towards Audrey. Their relationship couldn't be fixed because the only way that Annabelle saw Audrey was if Audrey was her slave. And Audrey, now that she's a mother and now that she's experienced heartbreak, and she has experienced hunger, and has experienced life without, she's not one to just sit back. She actually strikes back. So they had animosity. They were fighting consistently, to a point where Audrey decided that as soon as her grandfather, who was ailing in age already, passes on, that she's gonna move back to Europe. Her grandfather does pass on eventually, and Audrey continues to adventure on to Europe. Her and Charles are not back together, and in that meantime, Charles decided that he was gonna get married to another woman called Charlotte, who was also his book editor. There's a thick atmosphere in Europe at that time when Audrey goes back with her daughter. She goes to see Victoria, and Victoria has made another friend who has a Jewish husband. Now they're still in the thick of things, but they're not really feeling, it's not intensive. You know, when it's like the calm before the storm, they can still ignore it because it feels very far. You know, it feels like it is not affecting them yet. Victoria's friend and Audrey's friend, who has a Jewish husband, they all decided that they were going to go on a trip on the train. They were on the train, and German soldiers were asking for passports, asking if you're Jewish. The husband to that lady was then selected because he was Jewish, and he was taken off the train and he was taken to a concentration camp. He was then killed. That's when Audrey's life kind of changed, as much as the partner to the gentleman, the Jewish gentleman that was killed, changed. And that's when the realization came towards everybody that, oh wow, this is actually a real thing. And she was not okay, and she had to go move back with her parents. And when Audrey came back and Victoria came back, World War II was essentially announced. My apologies. The character, the friend of Audrey's called Violin. That's when the situation kind of hit them when they got back to Europe, to the guest house, to the home of Violet and Simon. And Simon had to go off and fly a fighter jet. And at that time, Charles was going through bad relationship problems. Charles' wife, Charlotte, was his editor, and she did end up getting killed. Charles got another mission, which was in Africa, and essentially him and Audrey got back together. And in that mission, he went to Africa with Audrey as his photographer, and Charles was then accused of being a spy, and he was working as a spy for America against Cairo, against the general of Cairo in Egypt. And essentially at the end of that whole mission, Charles got bombed, and I think at some point lost his leg. Explores the emotion of people that were actually close to that happening, the emotions of people that were actually amidst the World War II in Europe. It explores the how it is to lose family members, close loved ones, just based on the fact that they are Jewish. And from the moment that I saw this book, I was like, hey, if I ever have a YouTube channel, I would do a review on this book. Because did I read it again? No. Will I read it again? Maybe. I still think now that I'm talking about it, it makes me feel like I'm older now, so I can reason it in a grown up way. She tells real stories of real people, and her stories are usually the type of stories that you can actually imagine your neighbor going through. You can imagine yourself going through. Human emotion while it's going, how it grows and how it expands, and how it shrinks or how it dies while it's going through changes, and surviving. She explores a lot of surviving, the author Danielle Steel, and I really appreciate that. And the character of Audrey seeks freedom and seeks knowledge and seeks thyself, and then works within her power and explores her spirit. So I think that is a very beautiful thing, and I think reading the 400 plus pages, 407 pages, 46 chapters later, read it in 2 days because it's that gripping. I really do think everybody should read it. And even if you don't know how to digest it at the moment that you're reading it, when you actually do get into it and you actually do get to understand or get older or more experienced, you'll see that as you're reading this book, the character is growing within. So you know what happens with Danielle Steel books is the character itself tells its story. Danielle Steel does with her books, she explores the process of life. What I might not understand today, I can understand in 40 years or 10 years time. Where a relationship wouldn't work today, it will probably work in 10 years and 20 years time, because you have gotten to a point where you understand yourself and you understand what you're looking for. So I think that is what Danielle Steel explores through death, through life, through relationships, is she explores the fact that time is an ever-going thing and time tends to heal. And no matter what happens, even if it is not how you thought it would happen, if it's meant to happen, it will happen. So you just have to survive. There's certain circumstances and there's certain situations that only require you to survive, but ultimately when you look back upon your life, it'd be like, yeah, that was me, I needed to go through that in order for me to get to this stage of my life and become a better person through what I went through. So I think will be timeless because of our ability to explore time. I should just put like a period right there, just bah. My name is Masikana, and thank you for arriving this far. If you did arrive this far in the video, if you didn't, it's cool. I'll still continue making videos because it's something that I like. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. If you want me to review any books, you can comment and I will look into them.